As always, the opinions expressed in this program do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of DKI APCSS, the U.S. Department of Defense, or the U.S. government.
So it was important that we had both men and women working in special operations. I've always said men and women are different, and our differences are our strength.
From the Daniel K. Inouye Asia Pacific Center for Security Studies in Honolulu, Hawaii, welcome to episode 10 of the Security Nexus webinar, Australia's first female commando, a tale of resilience. I'm your host, James Minnick, Colonel United States Army, retired, and DKI APCSS professor. In the wake of International Women's Day, celebrated on March 8th, with this year's theme being Inspire Inclusion, our conversation today is not just timely, but essential. Reflecting on the path toward gender equality, we acknowledge significant achievements in the ongoing journey toward inclusive environments everywhere, particularly within the military and security sectors. The inclusion of women is indispensable for national security, requiring more than just opening doors. It demands dismantling long-standing barriers and cultivating systems that wholeheartedly welcome and value women. The security sector, historically male-dominated, has seen slow progress toward real inclusion, often meeting resistance. In 1982, when I became a soldier, women constituted merely 9% of U.S. service members, a figure that has only increased to 17% today. The challenge of recruiting and retaining women in the military deeply intertwines with organizational culture, a concern that extends beyond the U.S. to allies like Australia, Canada, and Japan. Today, we're honored to have with us Lieutenant Colonel Robyn Fellows. As a pioneer, Robyn made the uncommon choice to serve 38 years in the Australian Army, breaking new ground in 1999 as the first Australian woman to earn the Commando Green Beret. Her memoir, Wings of Change, and her career, from global deployments to her significant role as a military gender advisor, underscore her relentless pursuit of inclusion. Through her story, Robyn embodies the spirit of Inspire Inclusion, championing efforts to empower women within the military and advocate for systemic change. Robyn, it's truly an honor to welcome you today.
James, thank you so much for having me on this very important series.
Your journey to becoming Australia's first female Green Beret is a testament of your extraordinary determination. Robyn, could you share some key milestones and motivations that propelled you along this remarkable path in the Australian Army?
Of course, James. When I think about it, I think of two pivotal moments early on in my career. In fact, the first moment was I had actually only been in the Army about 6 months. And I remember that we were conducting some additional military training, and we were receiving a brief on guerrilla warfare from this very experienced Special Forces warrant officer. And he was telling us about the role of Special Forces in guerrilla warfare, how Special Forces teams would go into a country, how they would engage with the population, they would train the population and may arm the population and carry out a task or a mission. And I remember at the conclusion of that brief, I put my very shaky hand in the air and I asked the warrant officer, did he have any women in his Special Forces teams? And he went, of course we don't. And I was looking back at him equally perplexed as to why wouldn't he have women in his teams? I mean, he's dealing with communities that are 50% women. So why wouldn't there be women as part of the team? And one thing I knew early on is that men talk to men, women talk to women, and you only have to look at an Australian barbecue to see this in action. But of course, that's replicated in other societies and cultures. So we certainly left each other after that briefing. He was shaking his head at me, and I was shaking my head at him, of course, on the inside for me. The second thing that happened to me was several years later, when I was on my first operational deployment to Bougainville. Now, I was a captain at that stage, and they were sending a regional response to the civil war that had occurred in Bougainville. So it was called the Peace Monitoring Group. And so just to provide some context here, so Bougainville is a matrilineal society. So land is passed on through the women in the society. So what one of the root causes of this conflict was that the men had taken over and were passing the land on to the company that was mining there at the time, which happened to be an Australian gold and copper mine. So yes, that was one root cause, and of course there were many others as well. But what had happened? So I was sent as part of this peace monitoring group, and we travelled there by ship. And as we arrived in Bougainville, we were told to very quickly get off the ship because the Bougainville peace delegation was coming onto the ship because there were good facilities on there, so they could, conduct the peace talks. And so we quickly grabbed our bags and got off. But I remember standing there and I was watching this delegation, the Bougainville delegation, walk onto the ship, and I didn't see any women. And I thought that was odd, considering it was primarily a matrilineal society. So I thought, okay, I filed that and would check it out later. So I was I deployed into my area of operations, and we started immediately. We were conducting peace meetings with the community. So we dealt directly with the leaders and with the chiefs, all of whom were male. So what I would do in my patrol, I was a captain, as I said, and I was a patrol commander. So I made the decision for my second in command, who was Fijian. I said, I want you to talk to the chiefs, and I will talk to the women, and then we will compare what is happening. I thought we would get similar information. We ended up getting opposite information. So the chiefs and leaders were saying that the peace process was going really well, arms were being returned, and everything was tickety-boo. And the information I was getting from the women was the opposite. So they were telling me they had no freedom of movement, that there were armed gangs roaming the island. They were perpetrating sexual violence against the women and the girls. And it was definitely a fraught security danger. And they asked me if I could help. So firstly, I verified that this was a situation across our entire AO, which it was. And I confirmed the women that they wanted to get together so they could talk about the peace process, they could talk about the security situation. And so I thought this was straightforward. I went to my team leader. He was a lieutenant colonel, and he was New Zealander. And I said to him, explain the situation. I said, we have a security situation here, and the women have asked me, they want to gather to talk. And he said, no, you can't do it. It's not part of the mission. And I said, well, no, I think it is part of the mission because women need to be part of the peace process. So I actually had to go back to him another 2 times before I could convince him that it was the right thing to do. And he said to me, he said, fine, you can do it. However, you do it in your own time. So I was more than happy to do that. So being a Signals Corps officer, I sat down, I wrote messages to our headquarters in Arawa, and I was able to get additional helo support, additional boats, additional vehicles. So I was able to bring the women to Tonu. So my team leader, he was good in the respect that he allowed me to use our secure base in Tonu. So it provided a safe and secure environment for these women to gather. So there were several hundred women, which I found out later, not only came from our area of operations, but from across the island. And those women talked about the security situation. They were suffering from it, so they knew what the solutions were. They talked about the peace process, and they talked about it for several days. And I know, sitting back and reflecting on it, was that we had actually deployed to this operation with no plan to engage with the women at all as part of the peace process. So this was back in 1998. So that was 2 years before the release of UNSCR 1325 Women, Peace and Security. So I very much saw firsthand how those women were disproportionately affected by conflict, and certainly how they were being kept out of the peace process. So I returned from my deployment in Bougainville, and that exact same year I was approached and asked if I would do the Commando selection course. So with my recent experience in Bougainville, and very much remembering that warrant officer giving me the brief on guerrilla warfare, I didn't have to think too hard to say yes to that offer. So I guess, in summary, those two events, they certainly shaped the future actions that I took. So I certainly had my gender lens firmly in place as I move forward in my career. Over.
Oh my goodness, those are tremendous stories you shared with us, and my mind was racing through the episodes you were telling, and I'll have to tell you, your book, Wings of Change, I'm sure I want to talk just a minute about some of those stories you shared with their viewers. I remember reading in here, but I'll tell the viewers that while I've got a hard copy here, I also have the ebook as well, and I know that you recently released the audio version. I've not listened to that. I'll have to, but I guess maybe I'll transition a minute and ask you to speak a bit about your motivation for writing your story. Your memoir offers a powerful glimpse into your military experiences, and you've shared some with us, but what inspired you, Robyn, to share these moments with the world, and what message do you hope to convey?
Yes, certainly. I think I have been very fortunate, and I've had quite a unique career. However, when I became a gender advisor in 2016, I found myself using examples and sharing my examples or somebody else's examples, to demonstrate to people the importance of considering gender considerations in our operational planning. And but it wasn't until 2020 when I was being interviewed for a book which is called Winning the Peace, my apologies, which is a collection of ADF gender advisor profiles. And I recall I was talking to the author, and I was rattling off, a few of my experiences, and she stopped me and she said, you should write a book. And I went, okay, that's a good idea. And I did. And it was the reason because then I could share those experiences with more people. So I mind mapped my experiences and actually being old school, a piece of butcher's paper, and I put the stories on the butcher's paper, and then I realised that that the common theme there was change. So I was quite easy to actually come up at the end of the writing. I called the book Wings of Change. It was also a play on the Commando wings, which you know, I found out we also call the green moth. But the book, I wanted to demonstrate that we are capable of overcoming adversity, that we can empower others, and that we can drive positive change in any of the areas we're involved in. I also wanted to inspire people who are struggling, and that your past does not define you, so that you are always capable of making the change required. It is never too late. Over.
Thank you. I want to ask you about you know, healing that comes through writing. Often it can be therapeutic as we write and we think and we process our past experiences. So then I might ask you, in your words, you talk about how writing this book was a tribute to your mother's legacy, and a medium to navigate your own amazing, but at times challenging journey, while extending support to others facing similar challenges, as you've just spoke about. But I guess you know, could you describe how putting your experiences into words helped you gain perspective or even find closure?
Yes, absolutely, James. Writing that book was extremely cathartic for me, and it also helped other people. Interestingly, when I wrote the book, I didn't write about my childhood. I just focused on those professional stories. But after I'd got the professional stories down in ink, I went, I have to talk about my childhood, because how did I get here? And I actually found it very difficult talking about, or certainly writing about my childhood, to the point, you know, I was crying when I was writing. So crying and typing, when you're not a very good typist, you know, wasn't very productive. So I actually found that I would actually write, particularly when writing about my childhood, I would just write it freehand, and then I'd actually type the notes up at the end of the day. Certainly writing about the domestic violence with my father that he perpetrated against my mother and myself and my three sisters, that was difficult. Spending a childhood walking on eggshells, it was difficult. But, you know, we became disciplined, we became resilient, and we certainly learned to focus on the important things in life. You know, we certainly learned not to sweat the small stuff. Writing about getting to that point in your life that you thought of ending it, that was difficult too. But when I finished that book, it was unbelievable. It was a huge sense of relief. But interestingly, at that point, I nearly didn't publish it. I thought, great, you know, it's been very cathartic. I've learned a lot, and yeah, I'm just going to file it. I'm just going to, and I was going to file it, and I had to make the decision. It was a Friday. I had to make the decision on the Monday about publishing. So I thought, I'll take this weekend and I'll make a decision. I'll either file or publish it, you know. And I reflected over the weekend. Firstly, I thought I'd sort of been too honest in the book. You know, I felt I'd made myself vulnerable, and I am a particularly private person. But reflecting on the book, maybe had a couple of glasses of red wine, that I realised, why did I write that book? I wrote that book to share my experiences with other people, warts and all. So I made that decision to publish it. I'm glad I did. You know, since I published it, I have had so many emails, texts, letters. I didn't realize people still wrote letters, but they do. And from men and women who found parts in the book that resonated with them, and they said they too had found the book cathartic for them. So yes, I was very happy that I took that final step. Over.
Robyn, thank you for sharing those personal touches with us. I will tell you, I found the book very approachable. It is easy to engage with the book. Of course, you know, there's materials that can make one their own mind flash perhaps in their lives or other people's lives. It took courage to share those things after you wrote them, and so I have no doubt the stories you've shared with us have touched many lives. I think maybe we'll transition a little bit. We'll talk about challenges that, you know, perhaps are faced in the military as well. And so, you know, as you pave the way for future generations, I mean, your career in the Australian Defence Forces has undoubtedly, though, encountered challenges in breaking down gender barriers. You shared a little bit with us, but maybe you might have some other specific instances where you've navigated gender-based obstacles during your service, and then the insights you gained from those experiences.
Yes, certainly the main obstacle I faced was after I had completed the Commando selection course, as had two other women. All three of us passed that course. Now, at the end of that, the Commander of Special Operations put a ban on women conducting this selection course after that. Now, I think that was my biggest disappointed that the leadership, that they didn't see the potential of having beret qualified women that could, you know, increase the capacity and the capability of special forces. I knew there was a cadre of strong, smart women out there who could easily pass that selection course if they had been given the opportunity. And here I think, you know, this is where the male leadership at the time, they really did lack vision. I mean, yes, there could have been some generational or cultural blocks, but that vision wasn't there. I also think that they were very risk adverse, and because the course is a pass or fail for whoever attends it, I didn't see that risk was there for the leadership. Now, that was in 1999. So it took 15 years until we had our first female Prime Minister in 2014, Julia Gillard, that she opened up all the positions to all the combat positions and special forces to women. And I was disappointed that I think, you know, we really missed a good opportunity here to be world leaders in the employment of women, not only in special forces, but also in combat roles as well. Over.
Yeah, I would agree with you that those were unnecessarily missed opportunities to be able to have women more engaged. The United States was right around that same time when they opened up all combat arms positions to women as well, and so missed opportunities there as well. Let's talk a little bit about support from peers and mentors. In the face of challenges and the pursuit of success in the military, robust support systems, I mean, they're essential. So here's a question then, Robyn. Could you describe a mentor or a peer whose guidance was invaluable to your journey and highlight the qualities that they possessed that made them so impactful?
Yes, what comes to mind is my CO when I was an adjutant. So he was very instrumental in helping me, further develop my leadership skills. He gave me a bunch of books to read, but the book that stood out to me was The Three Monkeys. And it's about where you people try and get the monkey off their back and put it on your back. And so that was a very important lesson for me to learn, because as Army officers, as you would know, we are very keen, we lean forward and we want to solve the problems. So that book helped me to stop. It helped me to learn to listen, and then to only provide that broad guidance required so that the young officers or all the staff could go and resolve that problem themselves. I also learned that you should never try to win every battle. And once again, young officers, we want to succeed at everything. Certainly my commanding officer taught me to choose my battles, and certainly by all means, you keep your mind, and your goal on the end game, which is to win the war. My CO was, he was calm, he was competent, he had a great sense of humour, but it was his just quiet and effective leadership that I've tried to emulate over the years. Over.
Oh, thank you for that. Robyn, let's just pull on this just a little bit more, and maybe now you in the leadership role. And so could you share experiences from your deployments that significantly shaped your leadership style or your understanding of operating in complex cross-cultural situations?
Yes, for sure. So here, where I'll take us will be to my deployment in 2018 to UNMISS. So that's a UN mission in South Sudan. So I deployed there as the military gender advisor. So my first task, as we know as gender advisors, is to conduct a gender analysis. So the data revealed that 60% of the conflict-related sexual violence was being perpetrated against the civilian population by the security forces. And of those violations, 97% were perpetrated against women and 3% were perpetrated against men and boys. So I took that data. I then engaged and established working relationships with the civilian components. So there were the positions like Senior Women's Protection Advisor, the Gender Affairs, and of course, Child Protection Unit. Now, after I had all that information, I then established my main effort would be to engage with the women in the Sudanese Peace Liberation Army, to empower them, to educate them so they could contribute more meaningfully to the defence of their country, which is what they asked me and what they told me that they wanted to do. So I had learned in my Gen Ad training that if you have women employed within a military, they will have a positive influence on the actions of that military over the long term. So, and my long-term aim was to reduce the amount of conflict-related sexual violence that was being perpetrated against the civilian population by the security forces. My main effort was to start that process of engaging with the SPLA, and my plan was to create a WPS workshop for them. Over.
Thank you for that. As you were speaking, several things came to mind. I thought about, we must always ask ourselves, for whom are we providing security? But we come to security issues often maybe through a traditional security lens where the state is the referent, is the object of security, and yet people are the priority when it comes to security, and we often discount their needs at best. And at the worst end, as you spoke right here, we're the perpetrators of the violence upon them. It's absolutely horrific. Similar experiences of my own from Afghanistan, but I won't go into those here, but they reminded me of many things I had experienced there as well. But let's pull a little bit more on your operational experiences. You spoke about in your time in Bougainville, and you were also in East Timor, Iraq, Afghanistan, and you also mentioned South Sudan. And all of these, without a doubt, offer the unique perspectives on resilience and adaptability. And so I guess I would ask you to share some defining experiences or an experience from one of your deployments, a moment that significantly impacted you either personally or professionally. I know you pulled on a bunch, but maybe you've got some more you might share with us.
Yes, you're right. There have been a lot, but the one particular instance that made me sit back was I was working with the Human Rights Division in South Sudan, and they were investigating where a 10-year-old girl had been put in jail for adultery. Now, I was very much aware of the state of the jails in South Sudan. The prisoners get manacled at the ankles, and if you were a woman or a girl, you were prone to sexual violence from the police who were there to protect you. So clearly this girl had been raped and then put in prison for adultery. And it just really made me realize how much that country needs to change, where the perpetrators of this sexual violence were getting off scot-free. I mean, certainly due to breakdown in the judicial system, but the societies and that particular society and culture certainly favoured the male. But I guess on the upside of that, I saw many cases where the women and the girls were facing adversity, and overcoming that adversity, and I found that extremely inspiring and very humbling.
I want to talk a little bit about the importance of women in military roles. Military success today hinges on a diverse force, and that uses the full spectrum of its members' skills and perspectives to enhance our decision-making, cultural understanding, and overall mission effectiveness. Robyn, could you share examples from your military experience where diverse skills and perspectives led to a better outcome or a unique solution to a challenge?
Yes, James, I spoke before about this SPLA WPS workshop, which I created for the SPLA women so they could contribute more meaningfully to the defence of their country. And, I engaged with them. I asked them what was their solution to this problem, and they told me that they wanted to know more about human rights. They wanted to know about South Sudanese law, international humanitarian laws, sexual and gender-based violence, and sexual harassment in the workplace, as well as other topics like financial planning. So I designed this 3-day workshop from primarily the input from the civilian components of the mission. So I engaged with the rule of law, senior women's protection advisor, gender affairs, civil affairs, and I also engaged with women's groups in South Sudan. So because of this diverse input, I believe that this course, was tailor-made to what these SPLA women wanted, and more importantly, that they deemed that the course was successful and met their needs. The next step from my perspective was to refine the course, but I wanted to roll that course out across the sectors, the different sectors in the country, because my target audience was that middle male leadership that was either ordering or allowing for this conflict-related sexual violence to be perpetrated against the civilian population. Over.
Thank you. I want to pull a little bit more on, you spoke a couple of times about military gender advisors, and there's probably many who don't really understand that role. You spoke about it some here, but maybe we could speak about it a little bit more. And so, you know, as we integrate gender and social cultural considerations, I mean, military gender advisors, I mean, they enhance the effectiveness of operational planning and execution for commanders. And maybe pull on this a little bit more. And so reflect on some tangible impacts that you've observed where integrating the gender and social cultural considerations significantly influence the mission's outcome or improve the well-being for the local communities. Often, I mean, maybe if I just offer a couple more thoughts, I guess. We sometimes see this as an afterthought. We've got the real mission here. And, oh, by the way, maybe we'll look at this. You even alluded to that in your opening about how you saw this as an issue. You took it to your commander and they're like, yeah, in your private time, you can look on this. This is a real problem, and leaders have a real responsibility to understand the communities where they operate and to try to create this better security. And so maybe you just talk a little bit more about these tangible impacts and where having gender advisors make a difference.
Yes, certainly. In UNMISS, I was the only trained, rolled and tasked member of a force of 14,000 that was responsible for integrating a gender perspective into the conduct of our operations. And I really saw my role as the lead gender planner in the force headquarters. So in order to conduct my role effectively, firstly, I engaged with the U5, so which is the planning team. And I made sure that that we had a gender perspective in our strategic mission guidance, which we got from UN headquarters. I made sure that we had a gender concept and a detailed annex in our force operation order that went out to all the section commanders, sector commanders. I attended all of the operation planning groups, and I was a sitting member of those planning groups. And I would even take out a member from the U5 with me when I would have meetings with the SPLA or women's groups, because I wanted these people, these planners, to see firsthand the challenges that we were dealing with as a force. Secondly, I worked very closely with the U2, so the intelligence team. I needed to make sure that those gender considerations were included in our intelligence collection plan. And I asked that they widen the collection, so we weren't just looking at just the IDP camps, that we were looking in the wider community. The civilian population required more protection. So that would allow us to better understand the trends, the hotspots, so we as a force were better positioned to prevent and protect the civil population. I worked with the U3, which is current operations, and to ensure that we included gender issues and sexual and gender-based violence reporting into our daily situational reports. This wasn't occurring, so that meant that the reports, that the patrols weren't reporting on these issues, and therefore we then weren't correctly informing future operations. I worked very closely with the U9, so that's the Civ Mil team, and I recall in particular, I was given a task by the deputy commander of the force, and my job was to find 15 women and girls who had obstetric fistula. So, which this condition makes these women and girls makes them the most vulnerable of the vulnerable. So I did the high-level planning for that task, which was meant in planning with UNFPA, because they were the UN agency who were bringing in the specialists, the surgeons from around the nation to conduct this surgery on these women and girls, which was absolutely life-changing. So I passed this task after the high-level planning was done. I passed that off to the U9, because they actually had, in all the sectors, they actually had a CIMIC operator, who were able to go out to select the women and girls. And the youngest we had was 10 years old. And they were brought back to Juba, the capital, for their absolutely life-changing surgery. So, yes, I really felt that we were contributing to the SRSG's mission priorities, which was protection of civilian and enduring peace. Over.
That's fascinating, awe-inspiring even to listen to you talk about being on the cutting edge of establishing gender advisor capabilities. There are certainly many organizations today that are perhaps starting to understand the necessity of doing such within their own organizations. Fewer, one amongst 14,000. Yeah, that was quite a load to hold up that you had to do. But maybe almost imparroting your words again, but establishing gender advisory capabilities within the military, I mean, it necessitates developing specialized training programs, which you spoke about, cultivating supportive network of advisors and human around, the country, getting women to and men to, I guess mostly to take on some of these roles. Navigating through the challenges such as institutional resistance, the constraints on resources, and why will we give you money? I mean, there are just 100, if not more, challenges. And even if we decide we're going to put together a program. But as you think about this more, what insights or best practices can you offer for organizations that are aiming to institute gender advisor programs today?
Yes, James, I think first and foremost, leadership buy-in is critical for the success of executing this capability effectively. And you also need that buy-in in this resource-constrained environment, which we all live in. The example I'm going to use is currently our Army gender advisor. She is ensuring that we've got those gender considerations, so those gender dynamics, those conflict drivers, that all of these pieces are contained in the high-level orders for our operations and exercises. So we need to ensure that the commanders are very much aware of their responsibilities and that they are directed to conduct these tasks. The Army Gender Advisor is now working on and creating the Gender Peace and Security implementation plan. So, which is now the detail is the how, the brigades and the units, how do they implement this, the gender perspectives. The detail in there, is the Army Gender Advisors also including measures of effectiveness, which is extremely important. She's detailing where the gen ads and the gender focal points are required to be as a minimum. So just gender focal point is that means that some person has another primary role other than their gender advisory role. Now, I am the gender advisor at Headquarters First Division, so my job is to get these gender focal points in all the key functional areas that contribute to the planning of our operations and exercises. And I need a gender focal point network in order to achieve that. So in our headquarters, we consider gender peace and security, or gender and military ops, we consider that to be an information related capability. So it's similar to other IRCs, CIMIC, CivMil, there's military public affairs, there's religious capability, to name a few. So the role, our role is to coordinate, synchronize those capabilities as part of a non-lethal effects plan. Now, those, if we're doing large scale combat operations, so that non-lethal effects plan needs to be synchronized with the lethal effects plan. So it's very important that this gender focal point network has the skills and knowledge to be able to input into both of these plans. Certainly, I think what we really have learned that if we are going to mainstream this capability, we need to have trained and dedicated gender focal points. So I can only talk for Army, but it is not business as usual yet. Over.
Thank you for that. As we start to transition, I want to ask you to give some advice for current and aspiring female military leaders. I mean, your groundbreaking military career has broken barriers. You've forged a path for future female leaders, and you've shaped your understanding of skills and mindsets that are essential for women to thrive in the armed forces. You understand this. And so I'll ask you, Robyn, could you share some key advice for those current and aspiring female military leaders seeking to navigate challenges and achieve their own goals within the armed forces?
Okay, that's a very big question, and I'll do my best to answer it. But for me, I think first and foremost, clarity is so important. So we need to understand the environment, we need to understand the problem set, and we need to understand our role within that. So that requires a learning mindset. So we need to have at the start of any problem solving, we need to have the big eyes, the big ears, and the mouth that's yes, contributing, but also asking questions. So, and I think as women, we need to trust our ability to figure things out. So with enough time, with enough input, we will figure things out. Another thing I've learned is, after 38 years, is not to lead with making a decision to change things until you have thoroughly understood what you're changing, because I've seen so often it is out with the old, in with the new, without people, taking the time to understand, well, what's already there, what can we improve on, and what can we build on. A lesson I have learnt the hard way, as probably most people have, when we're dealing with emails that have, that may upset people or be emotive, that you park these emails overnight. And I would say the same would be if you receive an email, you park it and reflect on overnight. Because and sure as often that you will make a different decision come the next morning, and we need time as human beings. We need time to be able to do that, and certainly that's the case if menopause is an issue too. So that also goes for actioning issues generally. So provided no one's going to die, of course, you don't rush in to resolve an issue. Don't do the knee-jerk reaction. So you take the time to reflect, digest the problem before you take that decision or action. What I do is, of an evening, I just take a small period of time. I reflect on what I did right or what I did wrong during the day, because I really think as women that we can be too hard on ourselves. And so short reflection, so I might look at something where I perhaps didn't put my best foot forward. I go, well, next time that happens, I'm going to do it better. And then I forget the issue and I move on. I think we also try and do too much. As a military, we get given tasks, of course, but within that, we get to prioritize those tasks. So certainly the example I'm using is when Lieutenant Colonel Fielding, who was the gender advisor at JOC, I was her deputy, and we were given the task of integrating a gender perspective into all Australian Defence Force operations and exercises. And we sat down and we distilled that down into 4 key tasks. Now, one of those tasks was to create an operational gender advisor course, because we knew from our analysis that we had to grow the capability. So, they certainly weren't small tasks, but what it meant was that all our effort was going into these needle moving tasks, and everything else we delegated or we dropped. So I think finally, I just think as women that we always need to remember that we drop the ladder behind us to help others, because we know how hard it is to climb that ladder. Over.
Thank you for that. As we're going to transition now, we've got a great lineup of questions from our audience, and we'll kind of go into a lightning round. So there's several here. These can be some quick responses, but let me kind of lay them out here. The first one is really on the essence of courage. So in your perspective, what is the essence of courage, and how is it manifested in your leadership and influence as a woman in the military?
Okay, that's a really good question. And when I think of courage, I always think about if everybody's doing something, it doesn't make it right. And if you're the only person doing it, doesn't make it wrong. So, and I also think acts of courage, they don't just happen, they're built on beliefs and on a person's standards and their experience. So it happens over time. I also think believing in something higher than yourself is also important as well, having faith in something higher. So I think all these factors, they would guide your decisions and your actions. So, which in my case, I never followed the crowd, and I always believed in what I was doing. Over.
Well said. The next one, post-qualification challenges is how I'd title this one. After earning your commando qualification, what challenges did you encounter and how did you address them?
Right. So the answer is I didn't encounter any challenges, because when I was working in the Special Forces group, the men knew that men and women think differently. So it was important that we had both men and women working in special operations. I've always said men and women are different, and our differences are our strength. So even though I may not have been able to change the mind of the commander of Special Forces, I didn't win that battle. I did conduct my role in Special Forces to the best of my ability. Over.
Let's go to the next one. Women's empowerment and peace. What are your vision and expectations for the future role of women in the armed forces, particularly in facilitating and leading peace processes?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's time to put the pedal to the metal. We know that women are critical to peace resolution and peace building. So we need to ensure that women are at all levels of leadership, that women are in these operations at the levels that they can facilitate. and these peace processes. We also need to ensure that our force elements reflect the communities in which we operate. And the point I just raised here, I do understand from a colleague of mine in UN Women that they do have engagement platoons now, which is half men, half women. So I think this is a really good idea. And then that allows for that deliberate engagement and that understanding of the community's requirements right from the tactical level. Over.
Brilliant. The next one, I'm going to title it Keys to a Breakthrough. So reflecting on your achievements, what key factors do you believe enabled your breakthrough in the military?
Yes, James, I keep coming back to clarity. I think clarity of mind, clarity of thought is so important. Like, I always knew what I needed to do, and if I didn't know, I would find out. So, it comes back to self-discipline, it comes back to determination, and certainly when the going gets tough, and it will, you will need some resilience as well. I certainly learned when I was doing that commando selection course that the mind was so much stronger than the body. And that really set me up to give me the confidence to take on any challenges and to do what I chose to do. Over.
Next one, confronting workplace discrimination. Have there been moments where you faced discrimination or harassment on duty? And if so, how did you respond to and address those situations?
So, no, James, I haven't experienced that. And certainly I would have no tolerance of either of them. But I did witness when I was in South Sudan, we had a UN police contingent that was deployed to the northern sector. And that contingent swiftly set up a brothel and was taking advantage of the local women. So as we know, that sexual exploitation and abuse, it's usually the result of poor leadership and discipline. And as we both know, the UN has a zero policy on sexual exploitation and abuse. So the police commissioner, who was Fijian, and she immediately she kicked out this contingent out of the country. They were gone in 48 hours. That was never I was seen of before. Her lack of tolerance and her swift action, I thought, was admirable, because this type of behaviour can undermine the legitimacy of the mission, and it did. So the SRSG and the leadership team, they had to do an awful lot of work, to regain the confidence back in the population that we were there to serve and protect. Over.
Yeah, your leadership was definitely needed because there were other leaders there who saw that and did not do the right thing. Disappointing on their part. Perspectives on international peers. We'll go quickly here, but could you share your insights on working with women in partner nations military forces?
Yes, so in my current role, we're focused on the Southwest Pacific. We know the region is contested at the moment. So, it's really important that we, now more than ever, that we establish these relationships with our partner nations. We know women, peace and security is a soft power. So it's an excellent means of establishing relationships as part of a whole of government effort. So in particular, we have a Pacific Defence Gender Network. So I think that with some effort is an excellent means of enhancing those relationships and building that WPS capability in the Southwest Pacific. Over.
This is the last question that has been submitted that I'll ask today. And so it's on fitness standards in the Special Forces. Considering the demanding nature of Special Forces training and operations, what's your stance on the differentiated fitness standards for women, and maybe discuss its impact on cohesion and mission success?
Okay, so I think the Special Forces selection and training, I think that's straightforward. You either pass or you fail. And that is necessary due to the nature of Special Forces operations. And the thing is, not all men can meet those requirements, as not all women can meet those requirements. So, yeah, that is why we have a selection course. We do know that men and women are physiologically different. So, yeah, I think, we do need to have different standards outside of Special Forces and key combat requirements. So as long as the individuals meet the requirements for their particular role, certainly, the chain of command, they need to be on point when it comes to maintaining that unit cohesion. Because, at the end of the day, we're built differently for a reason. So, we should work with those differences. So those differences aren't a weakness. Those differences are our strength. Over.
Robyn, as we draw our conversation to a close, could you recommend a book that explores similar themes, offering strategies for resilience, leadership development, or understanding the power of diversity in challenging environments? I know our viewers would appreciate hearing your suggestions.
Absolutely, James. You just might see it over my right shoulder. So the book is called Winning the Peace: Profiles of Australian Gender Advisors on Military Operations. So in the book, there's about 30 profiles of men, women, civilians of all services, and they talk about their experiences as a gender advisor on operations and exercise. And yours truly gets a little mention in there too. Over.
You do, in fact. It's the book just came out. I've read through it myself, and so I will echo your encouragements for others to read this as well. It's available online, I guess, as a PDF as well. We can add that in the show notes. I want to thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Robyn Fellows, for sharing your extraordinary journey and your insights with us today. This has been a story that inspires and highlights women's strengths in the security sector. Now, to our viewers, if you're captivated by complex geopolitical regional security and the struggle for self-determination, prepare for a riveting discussion on March 25th. I'm thrilled to be joined by my esteemed colleague, Professor Mike Burgoyne, as we dissect Taiwan's post-election strategic future. We'll analyze Taiwan's evolving political landscape, focusing on strategic defense and diplomatic challenges amidst shifting political dynamics. This is a can't-miss discussion for anyone interested in the future of Taiwan's security and its impact on regional stability. Mark your calendar and join us. Aloha oi, and until next time, this is James Minnick signing off. And for those inspired by Robyn's journey, don't forget to join us on our YouTube forum at DKI APCSS to continue the discussion. Until next time, stay inspired. As always, the opinions expressed in this program do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of DKI APCSS, the U.S. Department of Defense, or the U.S. government.